Welcome, everyone. My name is Nevin Kamath, and you are now here at the 12th and final episode of How to Become a Leader in the Trump Resistance. This is episode, like I said, 12, which is titled From One to Many, Starting a ResistPod. And that means, from one person to many people, becoming, a group that makes a difference in the movement, starting in your local area. So for today, I wanted to share a quick story about some aspects of what we're going to be hearing about. When I first started my pod in Austin, I held a number of meetings at the library, and I think I've mentioned this a few times early in this series. I posted these events on event platforms online like Meetup and Facebook and Mobilize. And that attracted people who were interested in a mission that was different than what they had heard about, a mission of lawful, nonviolent civil resistance. And it really did bring in regular new people into my life. And I really cherish those moments quite a bit. That group of initial folks eventually turned into a coalesced team that we eventually called Resist Austin. And we did some really good work over the first, 3 to 4 months we were together. We really rode the wave of Tesla takedown. And at our first protest, you're never going to believe this, but like 150 people showed up. And it was at the height of all of the madness with Elon and Doge, and even a counter protester, Alex Jones, showed up at our protest to bark at us from his Cybertruck. It was wild. And we also obtained advice from a lawyer to figure out how to formalize our entity into an actual nonprofit, which is something you might find way more than what you need, or you might find it to be suitable for your expectations. But all of these things we're going to be talking about in some way, shape, or form today, because we do have a couple of experts who can shed light on the kinds of team building and leadership challenges that you may experience when you're starting your own pod, or when you're joining another pod, and or the legal and compliance needs that you may or may not need to surmount while you're developing a pod of your own. So, in terms of our formal introduction, let me share that. We have a little blurb here that states, once people begin working together, right, the challenge is removing from loose collaboration into a stable and resilient group. And so in our first segment, building your core team, we'll dive into how to deepen trust, practice authority without alienation, and navigate conflict constructively. In securing a legal foundation, which is our second segment, we'll examine the structural choices that can help a resist pod endure, such as deciding whether and how to formalize, protecting members from risk, and managing money responsibly. Together, these segments will equip organizers to transform an emerging circle of activists into a durable grassroots resistance group, or as we call it, a resist pod. So here we go. Tracy, would you like to read this slide? Now you're on mute.
Sorry, I lost my place. I'm back now.
No worries.
Our vision is a future without Trump and his enablers in power. Our mission is lawful, nonviolent civil resistance of Trump and his enablers. Our values are collaboration, integrity, nonpartisanship, and professionalism.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tracy. And I'll also share that we would love for folks who haven't already been part of our orientation to attend an orientation event. I just put a couple of links in the chat to that event and to the guide that we use to orient people to our campaign. Tracy, you want to tell people a little bit about yourself?
Sure, why not? I am an old retired lady. I I'm not even sure how I came to meet Nevin. I know that it was early on, and I mean I don't remember how I heard about Resist Trump, but I went to an orientation way back in like December, I think, somewhere around in there. And I've been following him around ever since.
Yeah,
um,
well, I think we've been following each other around to some extent as well. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, it's been lovely working with Tracy. Tracy's been an incredible campaign volunteer for us. I have been leading this campaign as the director since we started back in November, a couple days after the election, where it was just an idea. Then we formalized our entity in April 2025 and have been working to develop our team as well from the campaign point of view, as well as in the ResistPod in our prototype chapter or pilot chapter, Resist Austin. So yeah, it's really a pleasure to be here with you guys tonight, and I'm very pleased about what we're about to share with you. So let's do our recitation of the First Amendment, which probably is as important as ever tonight in our country's history. What do you think?
Absolutely. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment or of religion. Sorry, I'm gonna get it together. Or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
Well,
Now,
I don't know about you guys.
go ahead.
I don't know about you guys, but I've got a couple of grievances, and I imagine some of the folks here do too. So I appreciate you guys coming here to assemble peaceably with us, exercise our freedom of speech, and use that First Amendment to the greatest extent possible, which, in my view, is no more has never been as important as it is literally right now.
Mm-hmm.
Just put a couple of links in the chat or a link to the chat to talk about how the First Amendment has developed. And we also share this in the YouTube notes as well. Okay, so we are at the final end of we're almost, I guess, at the last episode of our 12 episode series, How to Become a Leader in the Trump Resistance. You guys have made it this far, and you should really give yourselves a big hand. I'm going to give you a big hand right now. It's amazing that many of you have attended a majority of these courses, and we are so proud of that fact. Some of you will be just seeing this for the first time, either in person right now or on YouTube later, and that's fine too. You can always just kind of review the episodes that interest you. As you can see, we have split this course into 3 portions with assignments after each portion, each module or level. First, we want to encourage activists to host a get-together, which is really the first step in being an organizer is hosting a get-together, whether at your house or the library or somewhere else like a park. Then at some point when you're ready, use that First Amendment right to assemble, to redress, to petition the government for a redress of grievances and protest, host a lawful protest. And several of you we know have experience doing that as well. And then finally, declare a resist pod is the last piece of the course that we want to encourage people to experiment with and try out because we know how important it is for the movement, for local resistance, grassroots groups to emerge and to make a difference in their community all over the country. Where we are specifically in the course is as is shown on the slide that you see now. Last week, we discussed with Joe Worthy Advanced Nonviolent Civil Resistance Strategy, where we talked about 2 concepts, the spectrum of allies and pillars of support. And this week, we'll be talking about assembling a core team and securing a legal foundation. I just want to note that next week, we're going to be doing a debrief and celebration. And I want to invite everyone here to help us with a survey that we're going to be sharing in that we've actually already shared in the recap to the last episode. But I'll share. This is what it looks like. It's a 6 question survey. It'll probably take you 5 to 7 minutes max. It's a very simple survey asking you just like which episodes were your favorite, and then a little bit of qualitative and some a little very light quantitative feedback. We would really appreciate if you could respond to that survey. And so I'll just put that survey in the chat now to have people, if you want to bookmark that link. But that would be a real value add for us as we go into next week, where we're going to have kind of a debrief where we unpack the results of the survey, reflect on what this course has done both for us and for our audience of learners like you, how it has helped us build relationships with experts in the community, and just celebrate, because I think moments of celebration are important to have during dark times. All right. So we're almost getting started. Our agenda for today is, again, 2 sections. We're going to be doing segment 1 and then a Q&A after that. We'll invite questions where you can raise your hand or come off mute or add a question in the chat. We'll do a Mentimeter and a breakout group as well for each segment. And then we'll have another segment on securing a legal foundation. So that's kind of the plan for tonight. And then we'll have a closing where we direct you on some places where you can go with your activism in between now and next week and just going on into the future. All right. So it is my pleasure to introduce our first guest, Brenna Atnikov. Brenna has extensive experience with multi-stakeholder initiatives aimed at transforming systems in areas including health and health equity, post-secondary education, local government, and community economic development. She is honored to be a servant leader in partnerships and projects with Indigenous peoples, centering Indigenous knowledge systems and leveraging Rios's tools, that's Rios Partners, the company that she's connected with, and approaches to dismantle colonial, institutional, and systemic barriers to well-being in First Nations communities in Canada, the United States, and Australia. This incredible work. Brenna is passionate about systems change evaluation and strategic learning, the application of practices that enable groups to think about their work, learn from it, and integrate learnings to accelerate change. Further, she completed a course titled Principles of Collective Trauma Healing and strives to bring a trauma-informed systems change perspective to her work. Brenna lives in the beautiful and unceded traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking and Wasanic people. Excuse me if I did not pronounce those correctly. Where she, thank you, where she can be found on hiking trails, on her bike, or swimming in nearby lakes. Thank you so much, Brenna, for joining us today. It is a real pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for the invitation to be here.
Absolutely. So Brenna, I do want to kick things off by reflecting a bit on how leadership has evolved in our pilot chapter in Austin, and just kind of what that means in general. So we, like as I mentioned earlier in the call, a group of really kind of strangers came together, formed and had some very powerful experiences over a period of time. And that led me to want to discuss with you issues that I identified that I think would be helpful and instructive for other pods that are forming themselves. Those kind of main issues were trust, leading with authority, and navigating conflict. What are your initial thoughts on those issues? And do you have any ideas on maybe things we haven't yet thought about with that collection of issues that we may want to be also aware of going forward?
Big question.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just start by saying one or two things about Rios Partners, and which is that we work globally. So you mentioned some of the countries that I work in, but as a team we work globally, and our founding is in working in some of the most complex contexts on the planet, including supporting the transition in South Africa from apartheid to democracy. And so that wasn't me. I was 10 years old at the time, but founders of the firm, that's that's their legacy and what I've been able to learn from in terms of my mentor. And so we focus on collaboration in contexts where people don't agree with, don't like, and don't trust one another. So it's those really perhaps extraordinary circumstances, of course, which you're experiencing in the US. Just for context, I'm Canadian, but I'm here in part because I believe our fates are all wrapped up with one another, and so your success is my success as well. And so I think in those years, we've learned a lot about these things that you're asking about trust, about leading with authority, about navigating conflict. And I think we'll have a chance to kind of go into the details of each. But the thing I would say about trust is that even when trust is fragile, and even before we trust one another, we can work together to advance our shared purpose and our shared mission. And that we don't have to counterintuitively agree on everything and spend time on getting to agreement and alignment, but rather where we make most of our progress is with an action orientation, and to not debate opinions or ideas, but to be grounded in evidence of what has happened. So we really impart how I think we establish trust in groups that is counterintuitive is give permission for a portfolio of actions and ideas to be implemented, so that we're not debating just one way forward, that there are multiple paths forward. So I would posit the idea that in a ResistPod there might be many people with different ideas about what needs to be done to be successful in that resistance, and we don't know the answers. We're in a complex, emergent, always changing context, and so we have to work in ways together that don't require debate and agreement before we do something, but can allow us to act and then use our experiences and the impact of our work to make the case to keep going, or to pivot, or to let something go. So that's the one thing as a way to begin, I would say, about trust. Around leading with authority, I actually, and maybe this is just my own response, but in my work, I haven't seen, well, yeah, I sort of think more about leading with integrity, dignity, and authenticity than I necessarily think about leading with authority. And part of, again, what we can go into is that I actually think leading and what leadership is really context dependent. And so different contexts require different kinds of leadership. And if we form only one, I don't know, definition or framing or mindset of what leadership is, we run the risk of there being a mismatch between the context and the kind of leadership that's required. So there's, if anything, leadership is a discernment of what is going on in this moment and what do I need to do? How do I need to show up to meet that moment? So I'm happy to talk more about that. And then with conflict, I think the main thing I would, just by way of starting is saying that conflict is inevitable. And I think when we try to avoid it and think that conflict equals bad, that's when things can really kind of spiral. And I think there can really be a generative aspect to conflict. There can be good that can come out of it, and it's all in the way that we navigate it with one another and create the psychological safety and the conditions where conflict is seen as a creative force as opposed to something we need to avoid.
Love it. You have some really complex and nuanced perspectives there on those three main areas that I was hoping to talk about. And I really do hope we have time to talk about all three. Maybe we can start with trust, because that's where I sort of brought things, and then that's where you responded as well. And I think what you said was, if I remember correctly, that there's like a multiplicity of ways that people can act in a complex situation, not just like one right way of doing things.
Yep.
And I want to bring it to like a situation where, if someone is hosting an event or bringing together, people who know each other roughly or kind of not so well, how can you implement practical strategies to build trust? Or does trust just does it just emerge over time through the process of working together and overcoming difficulties? How does trust work in a situation like that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's both and. So I think in a lot of the contexts that I worked in, you can imagine they start with fragile trust, like I'm here, I don't really know why I'm here, but I trust the guy who invited me, so that's why I'm here. I've been doing lots of work in Hawaii in the last 3 years, supporting both Native Hawaiians and others who live there to really shift the trajectory that state is on. And over and over and over, people tell the story that the convening person and the convening organization, the Hawaii Executive Collaborative, the leader had people really trusted him that they were like, when he calls, I show up. And that really helped get people in the room. So that first amount of, even if it's fragile, but someone with the credibility who has demonstrated that they are authentic and lead with integrity and can be relied upon, and that they're there for the right reasons. And then I think what you said is part of your question is really important, which what I've observed in my work is that trust is then built by doing the work together. So it's not that we have to have trust before we can act. Acting well together, including navigating conflict well together, is what builds trust, because there will be breakdowns, there will be moments of misunderstanding and miscommunication. All these things will happen, and it's how we navigate those things together which can be what builds trust. And maybe the last thing I'll say on this for now is that I think the most unappreciated behavior that builds trust is listening. We use a framework in Rios that's called the 4 ways of talking and listening, and it's about different ways that we both listen and talk, and the results of those ways of talking and listening as it relates to, are we recreating old realities and getting caught in those old realities, or are we talking and listening in a way with each other that helps to enact new realities? And I suspect what this is really about, what the ResistPods are about, what all of your activism is about, is to create a new reality, to shift the current trajectory that your country is on, and that how we listen to one another, to really be curious about, why does somebody hold the view that they do? Even in the ResistPods, where the degree of difference might be less than the degree of difference in the general population in the US right now, there will be differences of experience, of cultural backgrounds, of ideas of what should be done to enable a successful resistance. So really trying to understand, where is somebody coming from, not because you're trying to agree with them, but because you're only trying to understand. And when that is done well, that can open up a kind of intimacy and connection with people that's like, I get you. I may not agree with it, I may not like it, but I get you. And so here, what crack does that open up for us to be able to do something together?
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's I think you covered a lot of interesting angles there, ranging from the fact that trust can emerge by just doing the work together and by overcoming conflict, to just kind of demonstrating curiosity, to be able to learn about people that you're working with in order to build trust. I love that. Why don't we maybe switch over to talking a little bit about conflict, because you mentioned that, and I think it's an important place to go. How can what role does conflict play in the evolution of a group?
Mm. Maybe I'll just keep on this thread about the Hawaii work, because again, I think to me that's been one of the most instructive examples of my life. It's the work I'm most proud of. I always joke with my boss, I'm like, I could go out now, like if this is the last piece of work I ever do, I feel like I've made my contribution. And in that context, and I'm not sure how familiar folks on the call are with the history of Hawaii and the overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii in 1893, I believe it was, and the ensuing intergenerational pain that Native Hawaiians experience, both at the individual level, ancestrally alive in their bodies and in their communities today. And this feeling of being displaced in their own homeland and not heard, and really not taken, or being dismissed really in their homeland. And this arc of work that we went through with folks was a place for people to really talk story, is the phrase in Hawaii. And some people called it conflict. Part of me was like, wow, I as a facilitator kind of on the margins, I didn't necessarily like see overt conflict in terms of like yelling and the kinds of stuff we might associate with conflict. But real differences of experience, of understanding of history, of the current reality in Hawaii and what was really going on. And in just being able to talk to each other and hear these different stories and different perspectives, my sense was that people's blinders that they didn't even know they had were removed. And so this ability to listen well and talk well with one another, and navigating those real tensions of like, you don't understand what you're talking about, or like, why is this thing, I don't know if people were following the protests as it relates to the 30-meter telescope on the top of Mauna Kea, right? That was like real conflict in terms of protesting having another telescope built on the top of the sacred mountain. And people being able to like say, oh, I don't really understand why this was a big deal. And then a cultural practitioner saying, here's why it's a big deal. And then that building more of that shared understanding. So we're told, I think all people experienced it as a healing experience, and was created a lot of unexpected bonds across sides, across differences that one wouldn't imagine their ability to have those kinds of bonds. So I think conflict, in my experience, more often comes from wounds and hurts and unaddressed historical traumas and things that have been undiscussable, that when you create the right conditions for them to be discussable, can create the kind of healing that's necessary to be able to move forward. Doesn't mean you ever get over anything, and I think we should never be asking people to do that, but the way that it opens up a pathway to be able to move forward together, because people feel heard and understood, even if no one ever agrees with another person's perspective, but they feel understood.
That's fascinating. Thank you for that example. Well, I want to actually move now back into leadership. I had started the conversation by talking a little bit about leading with authority is the phrase that I use, and you had a very interesting take on that phrase and some other ways to think about like leading with integrity, or I think you said a few other words as well. And I want to share with you just like just a reflection on how Resist Austin, our pilot chapter, started, and how certain aspects of it may have led to potential conflict, right?
Mm.
So one aspect of the pod that we started was, which I think was interesting in retrospect, was that we didn't designate a clear leader. We had like a consensus-based leadership team that sort of swelled into a fairly large team.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that when we encountered our first, serious conflict as a leadership team, that led to much more conflict than I think anyone would have liked, possibly because there was no authoritative decision maker, possibly, to guide the situation with some level of authority. What is your
Right.
reflection on that? And do you think that that's I mean, I know you don't know all the details, but do you think that's like a fair read? How do you feel about groups that are just kind of forming and are trying to debate, do we have like a, triumvirate, or do we have like a team of 5 leaders, or do we have like a chair? How should groups think about that decision-making process early on the outset?
Mm. Well, let me think or offer some thoughts that might be an indirect way to answer the question that you've got. But again, I think there are lots of different structures for leading that can be, I sort of think of it as like the Mr. Potato Head of leadership, in the sense like different things are needed at different times, depending on what you're trying to do as a group. And as its simplest, I think what we often can get confused about is that when a group of people are working together, that's just generic collaboration. Like we're just collaborating, we're working together, we're getting stuff done. And in my work, I've seen there's it's actually helpful to kind of pull these apart and see that there are actually different types of collaboration in different contexts. And it relates to the complexity of the challenge that you're trying to navigate. And so there's often, in my experience, a mismatch of leadership tools that are designed for simplicity and things that are more straightforward. And there's a set of tools for collaboration and leadership that are designed for high complexity. And if we're if we're diagnosing the type of complexity we're working in incorrectly, and if we're connecting that with the wrong leadership toolkit, then that's, I think, where lots of leadership, the experience of leadership, can break down. And so, on the one hand, I think if things are relatively low complexity, I might call this conventional collaboration, right? That you get clear on roles and responsibilities. It can be easier to make decisions. All you have to do is make a plan and work the plan, right? And that's where you might use something like, if people are familiar with like RACIs or ASCIIs, or, you know, to pick a different way of making decisions, but being really clear about, in a low complexity matter, even if it's contained within a larger complex challenge, are you complexifying the decision-making structure? Like, are there some things that you can just say, I'm going to make a call here, and we're just going to try it out for 6 weeks or 2 months or whatever it is, and then learn and then pivot. And I think that's the other thing that can get lost in leadership, is that we can try stuff out, and we don't have to be like a decision we made in one moment may not be the right decision for 2 months from now, and so those can change. And then the other kind of collaboration that, you know, is certainly and leadership that I'm much more immersed in day to day, is in these highly complex contexts where there's really no cause and effect. What you're trying to do, nobody actually knows what the right answer is, because if we did, we would all just do it. And so we need to work more with acceptance of, there's no certainty, there's only emergent outcomes, and we have to learn our way forward. And so I think in those contexts, it's more of what I was saying before about kind of learning your way forward and saying, hey guys, can we agree to try this thing? And it's not set in stone forever, but let's try this and see what happens. What kind of feedback do we get back? And then iterate and make adjustments from there.
Thank you for that. There was a little bit of background noise for a little while. Was there like a machine or something in your
There
speaker?
is, yeah. Sorry.
Okay, it's completely fine. I wasn't sure what it was, but thank you for that.
My neighbor is excavating their yard, so that was good. Yes.
No worries. Okay, well, no, that was a really excellent discourse that we just learned from you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on all of those topics. I wanted to open it up to questions from our audience. If people have questions about building your core team, and you feel like you could hear a little bit from an expert tonight, feel free to drop a question in the chat, or write your question in the Q&A. Now would be a great time to do so. And as we kind of wait for any of those questions to come through, I have one last question for you, Brenna, and it's this: if you were to share with some advice with an aspiring, organizer of a ResistPod on building their core team, if you wanted to give, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 just like key pieces of advice, like what would those be?
Yeah, thanks for that. I was thinking about this when you sent the question. So there's some principles in our work that I think persist across working in teams. So the first one is relationships are the medium of creation. Of anything you're trying to do in the world, your relationships with people are what are going to enable you to do what you want to do. And so focusing on those relationships and how you anticipate conflict, anticipate that things are not going to be perfect, anticipate there will be mistakes, and proactively create the conditions where you can come back from those mistakes and come back from conflict are really important. So your relationships before everything else. And that's connected to, I guess, the 2 other things, which is that focusing on relationships over the process and relationships over predetermined results and outcomes, because those will shift, those will change. You'll as you learn and as your pods develop and mature and start to get work done and build trust. And I once was in a group where someone said, oh, what I used to think was this really gnarly challenge that we were trying to work on is now the thing that seems the simplest, and now there's this other thing we're trying to do that's really hard. So some things that felt hard initially will start to feel smoother and easier. And that to me is the maturation of a group who's then willing and able to take on more difficult things and more complex things. And then lastly, it's counterintuitively, especially in this world we're in right now, which is slow down to go fast. If you're rushing to get to outcomes, if you're rushing to produce something, if you're rushing to make decisions that aren't yet ready to be made, that's also when conflict comes up. When you're in Rios land, we would say if you're converging too quickly and you haven't yet done a sufficient diverge and made sense of all the ideas that are coming up, if you're rushing to decision, that's where conflict happens. So notice when you need to slow down to make better decisions, to do better work, to build better relationships, because then you'll be able to speed up later on.
I love that. Thank you for that. That's great. We did get a couple of new questions that came in. Going to the first one, what are the specific listening styles that you've adopted?
I can share a screen if that's useful. I've got this little, am I allowed
Sure.
to do that on this?
You
Yeah.
should be. Yeah.
So this is, if you can, everyone see that?
Yeah. I can see it.
Okay, it's just on my side screen, which is why I'm looking, doesn't look like I'm looking at you. But so this is a core framework that Rios uses, and there's lots of, I imagine you could Google this and you would find more. But the four kind of listening styles that we most draw our awareness to try to be paying attention to how we're listening. This first one is called projection. It's a kind of weird one, which is basically not listening. It's when somebody is talking and you've already decided that nothing they say means anything to you, and so you're really not listening to anything they're saying. You're just completely dismissing what's being said, and so you're not absorbing it, you're not curious about it, you're not integrating it into your own knowledge. This other type under this way of talking, listening, called debating, is judging. So you're listening, you're now hearing what somebody is saying, but you're judging whether you agree with it or you don't agree with it. And if you agree with it, great, you and I are cool. And if we don't agree with it, then like you're the other, and I don't want to have anything to say to you. And again, in a ResistPod, maybe that level of canceling, if you will, may not happen, but like how are you judging whether you agree or disagree with what someone is saying, and how is that affecting your ability to collaborate effectively with somebody? And then I think I mentioned this a bit before, this listening with curiosity and empathy. I may never agree with you, but I'm really curious about why you have the opinions that you do. Like I really want to understand your biography and your history and where you're coming from and your experiences in life that have led you to have the opinions that you have. And then last is this kind of listening with relaxed boundaries. So if you've ever been in a context or a situation with one or several people where it feels like whatever is arising in your conversation is the joint intelligence and wisdom of everybody there. It's not from one person. There's a real meshing of what is arising, and it's these relaxed boundaries where it's almost porous. If you've ever been in a situation where you're like, man, this person's just completing my sentences, you could argue that you're in this really beautiful state of relaxed boundaries and presencing. And so you can see that in these different ways of talking and listening, if we're only downloading and only debating, all we can do is reenact the existing realities that we're in. But if we're trying to build something new, then we need to be dialoguing and presencing with one another.
Wonderful. That's, amazing that you had that slide ready to go for that question. Thank you for that. That's amazing. So one last question, and then we'll probably have to move into breakout groups. This question comes from Kay Mallet. How can a group or group leader or leadership team handle a fear-based person or personality who insists on being negative or even obstructive?
Well, that's not easy because, at least in my experience and some of my training around trauma-informed practices, I would imagine fairly often fear is a response to some kind of trauma, whether acute or chronic or something, some experience in somebody's life. And so I guess one thing is that we all hold a certain amount of individual responsibility to do our own healing work so that we can show up in these spaces. That's been a big part of my journey. So I'm not sure if ResistPods might have group agreements or, agreed ways of being and behaving with each other, that especially if you've been able to cultivate enough psychological safety that you can speak to someone about their behavior that is creating an obstacle to a group being able to do what they need to do. And I don't know, in some of the work that I do, for example, we have off ramps for people where we're like, you know what, this may not be the time for you to be involved in this, and a graceful exit that allows for somebody to come back if and when they're able to. So I think it's partly around group agreements and how you have these tough conversations with folks from a place of compassion and love and grace. And I think because we're all trying to do really hard work on the planet, I think it's actually can be an act of compassion to say to somebody, hey, I'm noticing these things as you're interacting with the group. And this is where you employ your 4 ways of talking and listening, like, help me understand what's going on and how can we support one another, and what can this group do to create a more a place that feels safer so your fears aren't activated as much in this place.
Amazing. Thank you. That was a very compassionate perspective that you shared with us.
Mm.
Well, I think we're at the end of our time together. It's been such a pleasure talking with you today, Brenna. And I just want to thank you again for coming today and sitting with us and sharing your wisdom about how folks can build a core team. Thank you so much for coming. We're going to be moving into breakout rooms now, but folks, if you're out in the audience, feel free to use those emojis I think I just saw a bunch of hearts and applause. Feel free to drop a message in the chat for Brenna. Thanks again, Brenna. It's been really lovely having you here tonight.
It's really lovely. And like I said, I think even, Devin, when you and I first spoke a few months ago, I firmly believe that our fates are wrapped up with one another. And so those of us not in the US, but nearby, or some who are far, it's for all of us to be a part of this movement. So for those on the webinar, you feel free to search me out, find me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to continue to support where I can. And all the best. And we thank you for being at the center of the resistance.
Thank you, Brenna. Thanks so much.
Okay. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. All right, folks. I'm going to now set up a breakout room, but let me go ahead and share my screen and move into the question that we're going to invite you to consider. So let me go ahead and do that.
Do we want to do just one room?
Let's see. Yeah, we might be able to do that. I think we've got the folks for that. Let's see. Yeah, we'll be able to do that. Let me just see what the breakout room configuration does. Okay, so the question that we're going to be asking y'all, whether it's 1 or 2 rooms, is think back to a small group you've been a part of in the past. When it came to trust, authority, or conflict, which one shaped your experience the most, and what lessons would you like to carry forward into a ResistPod? All right, I'm going to share my screen one last time for this series, guys, and we'll just give you a little preview of what to expect from here on out. So we are now at the end of our 12-episode series. Can you believe it, Tracy? It's amazing. I don't think we're going to do a breakout group now. We're a little bit over time. So I just want to say next week, please do stop by the same space, the same webinar, to join us for a debrief and celebration of this course ending. I do want to share also the link to the survey. It would be really great to hear and to see some feedback from the folks who have made it this far. We really, really, really would appreciate that. And finally, I just want to thank all of the people who have been part of this course starting with Tracy, who's helped me moderate this from the very beginning, my co-pilot, all of the incredible speakers that we've had. We've probably had like 20, maybe 25 speakers come through our space. We've built so many connections with them, with all of you activists who are doing amazing work in your corner of the country. And so, yeah, just thanks for being part of this story and this journey, and being part of our little contribution to the movement in the way of this course. It's been really wonderful seeing you guys and kind of developing this course with you guys in our first go around. Tracy, do you got any thoughts that you want to share to our audience today?
Um, I feel, goodness, I'm not sure how to put this into words, but I feel like I'm much better prepared to move forward. You know, I have learned so much over the last 12 weeks. And I was already pretty involved at the time, you know, but I have learned a mountain of things and gotten different perspectives that I hadn't thought of before. It's just been wonderful from being both, you know, a moderator and a learner.
For sure. Yeah, for me too. I've learned so much, and hearing these perspectives have been so helpful. So yeah, I mean, feel free to share, our content far and wide. We're posting these on YouTube like a few days after each episode. So let people know how they can get involved and walk them through the training. I saw a question in the chat about whether the course will be repeated. I don't think we have decided yet about how we're going to move forward with the course, but maybe we can talk about that a little bit next week. So I think we're well over time tonight, but we've had some incredible speakers, so I don't want to apologize for it. But again, I just want to thank all of you for coming tonight. It's such a pleasure being here with you and seeing all your comments, seeing your reactions in the Zoom screen. And let's make this happen, guys. There's hope, and there's a possibility that we can succeed, and I believe that we will. And now we're a little bit smarter, and we can be activists in a little bit more of a sharper way. So have a good night, and we'll see you in the fight ahead.